tours that I went on to New Japan, they gave us suitcases. This one actually still has the bag tags, my name, and everything filled full of New Japan goodies from different Japanese memorabilia stuff. And they're Samsonite suitcases. And they gave these away for probably a year or two. And so during that year, I received 3 of these, one on every tour, and they were the same color. So some of the guys made some wisecracks, and they wound up, you know how the guys are, they ruin everything.
Yeah.
Not everybody, but some of them. And so they stopped giving these tremendous suitcases to the boys after, you know, people were calling them, you know, knocking the color. Why are they always the same color? And different things like that. But that's something that most people never see.
I've never heard of that before. That's pretty cool.
So, but I have all kinds of, you know, I've kept everything from my original Nike tennis shoes, my complete outfits from WrestleMania 2, 3, 4. Of course, I was at 5. I got paid, but I didn't participate because I had given my notice, and you know, Vince knew that I didn't want to do a job heading out. And it was really good because all of the independents were so hot, and we went to so many places. I mean, I should go get a ticket. I have, I'm going to put in my book actually as well. It's from Kota Kinabalu on the island of Sabah off the Malaysian coast. How many people have ever wrestled there? Well, the Nasty Boys were there, Frenchie Martin, some tremendous stories from there, Brady Boone. Just an awesome time. Awesome time.
Promoted that.
That was promoted by a guy named Mehar Singh.
Okay.
An Indian guy. So I went to India twice, once for Mehar Singh and once for a guy named Dylan. And we have one of the greatest ribs ever recorded that's actually recorded on video with Bertha Singh, who this promoter Dylan insisted that Bertha come to the show. And so Hal Jeffrey was the American promoter along with myself. I remember meeting in the Tampa Palms Gold's gym of mine, in which Steve Kern owned 20% of that particular Gold's gym. And Steve's one of my best friends. I see him constantly. And obviously we did really, really well in the gym business. So this guy Dylan, who I had never met, Hal Jeffrey had met him somewhere, and Hal Jeffrey actually promoted the Bahamas show that was Dwayne Johnson's first match with his father Rocky, and in the tag team match. And Hal was the minister for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he saw things that most ministers never see. But anyway, so we pulled this tremendous rib on Dylan because he was in love with Bertha. And do you remember Bertha Singh, Rhonda?
Yeah, she was in Bertha Faye in WWE, right?
Right, exactly. And just a wonderful woman. I mean, I don't know what it was that Dylan saw, but he just he was enamored with her. And I don't want to really go into the whole, I'd like to show you the video sometime because not too many people get to see this, but we happened to all be in rooms. David Sierra was there, the Cuban assassin, this guy, Nasty Ned. And I'm trying to think of the kid from Brandon that had the camera, but Dylan wanted to be with Rhonda so bad. You know, he said, he came up to me one morning at breakfast, this first or second day of the tour. It was like a 10-day tour, 8-day tour. And he said, Brian, I'm so in love with Rhonda. I've got to have Rhonda. What do I do to get Rhonda? I said, well, Dylan, you know, I don't know, but one thing you have to make sure is that Bam Bam doesn't see. He said, what? I said, yeah, Bam Bam, they're an item. You know what I mean? Oh, no, it cannot be. I said, yes, Dylan, it is. But it's okay. I said, Rhonda's cool, and I think she really likes you. Oh, really? So anyway, the rib went from there. Rhonda called Dylan up, and we had written down some demands that we wanted from Dylan, and we had noticed that all the rooms had two side tables. Now remember, this is on film. They have two side tables, and they were queen size or full size beds. And so we had on the list of things that Rhonda had to get were athletic tape, a bottle of either Chivas Regal's expensive scotch, like $150 a bottle there, shaving cream, razors. There was something else, a blindfold, a whip. Um, and so he, Dylan was anxious to get all this stuff. And so he got it all together. And after the matches, we all get in our room, or either that or we had the day off. I can't remember exactly. And so Rhonda calls Dylan up. Now, remember, all of us are in rooms side by side. And so Rhonda calls Dylan up. We planned it perfectly. We told Rhonda, look, get to Dylan's room, and then you're going to tie him up and put on a show for us. And we're going to, when you get him tied up and blindfolded, tell him you got to go to your room for a second to get something. Just put it in your own words. I mean, you can do it, Rhonda. And she was all excited, and what a fabulous job Rhonda did. I mean, absolutely fabulous. Talking so sexy. I mean, God, it was crazy. So when the time comes when she has to tell Dylan, I just need to go to my room for a second, she's going to come back in and shut the door, but then leave it open a crack so that we can come in. And Kevin was his name, from Brandon. So Kevin could set up, I can't think of his last name. So he could, it'll come to me, but so he could set up he had this portable tripod thing. You just set it down and there it goes. So we had it all planned out. Rhonda, you put on the show when the time's right. Bam Bam's going to slam the door and jump in and say, hey, what are you doing? So everything it was absolutely perfect, Devin. And so she's got him naked on the bed, and it looks like evolution passed him up. Not that I believe in evolution, but he's just like a hairy mammoth. He looks like, and she's slapping his willy and putting shave cream all over him. And oh, Rhonda, what are you doing, Rhonda? But I like it. Oh, okay. And the conversation's going back and forth, and all of a sudden she starts to pour some of the scotch on him. Oh, Rhonda, that's very expensive. What are you doing with that scotch? Oh, don't Dylan, I'm going to lick it off of you. Oh, okay. And he starts trembling. And again, this is all on film. And it was hilarious, all the stuff in between. And pretty soon we couldn't take it anymore. I mean, literally, we had snot coming out of our noses trying to keep from laughing, because it was just the greatest show you could imagine. And all of a sudden, when Bam Bam, he comes in and he slams the door and he goes, hey, Dylan, what are you doing with my old lady? He goes, he rips the whole tape from one wrist and curls up into a fetal position, and he's going, no, Bang Bang, no, Bang Bang. This is a dream. And so he's trying to convince Bam Bam, he's calling him Bang Bang, that it's a dream. And so, it was obviously not a dream. And so Bam Bam slaps him on the foot and says, next time I catch you with my old lady, I'm going to slit your throat. And we left, just went to the rooms. We're laughing so hard. The next morning at breakfast again, Dylan comes up to me and he goes, oh, Brian, a terrible thing happened to me. And I'm playing dumb, obviously. And I said, what happened, Dylan? He said, oh, you're right. Bam Bam and Bertha are an item. I did not know that. And Bertha came to my room. She asked to come to my room. I did not ask her, but she came to my room. And I just have to go to the mosque and say some prayers. So I must leave you now, but I will be back. And I said, okay, Dylan. And so he left to some mosque. And I'm telling you, it was just so absolutely off the chain hilarious. And to know that we have that on film is even funnier.
Does he know that it's on film?
He has no idea.
Oh, that's hilarious.
No idea whatsoever. So, I've just sat on it. I don't know what to do. I entertain some of my friends once in a while with it. So
Play it at Cauliflower Alley on the screen.
yeah, right. I mean, this is full triple X, brother. You can't do that.
Now, we didn't have the camera rolling a second ago. You had that trophy. Could you show that trophy again so I could get it on tape?
Sure. So obviously you're going to be able to edit this. So do you want me to go? You want me to start talking about Herb and the?
That's part of the Herb story. Are you
Yes.
just gonna put it? Okay. I'll open it up then, and then I'll just edit. I'll edit the rib story into the full shoot interview later.
Okay.
So I'll introduce you, and I'll get into it then. This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and today we have a return guest here on the Great North Wrestling Podcast. He is the president of the Cauliflower Alley Club, WWE legend, UWF Booker, we've just found out. He's one of the stars of the Dark Side of the Ring documentary on Herb Abrams, the Killer Bee himself, B. Brian Blair. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing awesome, Devin. It's so good to be on your show again. Thanks for having me.
You're looking well. Have you still been managing to work out despite this lockdown?
Oh, absolutely. I have a gym in my house. I have an elliptical, a treadmill, a Stairmaster, dumbbells, and of course DDPY yoga, which is one of my favorite things, especially since I had a back surgery last August. I actually wrestled a week before my back surgery, which I shouldn't have done. And then I had shoulder surgery. It was just 3 months on the 29th of April. So I'm just now, that's finally, that was my 15th operation from the wrestling industry. I mean, I don't know if you can see right here. I've had multiple stitches in my hand. I got stabbed here. I got went to hit Tully Blanchard, was wrestling Arn Anderson and Tully in Hamilton, Ontario. A bunch of people didn't show up. Grizzly Smith asked me to go on again for the third time, and so I finally succumbed to his wishes. He assured me that, Brunzell and I both had to work 3 times, and he assured us that we would be paid, and compensated fully for all 3 matches. I mean, we got paid, but not fully for all 3 matches, but that's what I got out of that. And then in Japan, I had Keto in the ropes in the corner. We were in Hiroshima. One of the first times that I've ever seen the Japanese get this mad. Paul Orndorff and Big John Studd. Actually, I have a picture right here. I love visual aids. Excuse me 1 second. Take this off here. Paul Orndorff and Big John Studd were my tag team partners. And we were wrestling Tatsumi Fujinami, Inoki, and Keto. And they were in the other corner, and I had Keto in my corner. And, I'm working him over, and all of a sudden I feel something hit my feet. And it was a fan trying to, Keto was a real good baby face. And then a couple more people started to come in, which you don't really see in Japan. Those people are very well behaved fans. And, if you've watched everything, but when you watch Japanese wrestling, you notice that the audience reacts completely different than the fans in Europe or America. And They're much more polite. They'll clap for a high spot, even for the heels, even for the bad guys, usually. But this time we had real heat. And so Keto got scared, and I was grabbed him by the trunks because he wanted to get away. And I didn't want him to get away, but he leaped with his hands. And when he did, my two fingers went and just popped the two tendons right there. So the doctors cut down all the way down to here looking for my tendons. They never found them. So they had to sew my these three fingers right here together. So if I, hold one, they all have to move together because they're all sewn to this pinky finger. And I've had 4 knee surgeries, a knee replacement, just so many injuries, 4 concussions. Got Donald Trump in WrestleMania 2. Andre threw me over the top rope, and we're in the middle of this deal. I didn't know who Donald Trump was, even, other than we were wrestling at some rich guy's casino. And when he threw me over the top rope, he was laughing. And Andre and I used to have a lot of fun together. And sometimes he took it a little too far. He's so strong. You just didn't realize, how strong Andre was. And he threw me so hard I couldn't catch the top rope. So on my chin, back then there was no protective barriers like you see now. And it was just a steel rail. My chin hit the that 14 stitches here. My chin hit the rail and blood starts pumping out. And I hear this lady say, Donald, I think that's real blood. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, no kidding, lady. Wow. And this man stands up in a nice suit and says, Killer Bee or Brian, whatever he said, can I help you? And nobody's coming to help me. Everybody's watching the match. And blood's just... So he grabbed the handkerchief out of his suit pocket. He put it on my chin, and he walked me all the way to the back. He stayed with me right there until the ambulance came, and he missed the whole, the whole battle royal. And I thought that was pretty nice of him. But I got a lot of stories with the injuries as they happen in the ring. There's kind of a story with every one of them.
So I'm guessing that bottom a vote in later years from you.
Oh, absolutely. People know I was a politician, and my dad's a Democrat. He's my best friend. I love my dad so much. He's 86 years old. Until the Hard Rock closed because of the pandemic, my dad does 2 or 3 crossword puzzles at 6 or 7 in the morning. He'll read half a novel. I gave him Forrest Scott Stevens novels about 2 weeks ago. He brought them back a week ago, and he had read all 4 of them. And that's just the kind of guy he is. But he plays poker every day at the Hard Rock, and there's no way he could lose because he's won the bad beat before, which is like 50,000 was how much he won at that time. And he wins high hands, and he spends a lot of time there, and he'll never bet more than $100. So he doesn't have a gambling problem. He does it to stay mentally sharp. And at 86 years old, it's between you and I. Well, I guess it's not between you and I, but I guess I've already gotten myself in this far. So he asked me for one of those little blue pills the other day. So that's the kind of 86-year-old dad, to have. So it was, he's a great dad, and politics is just in my blood. I've been an elected county official, been a businessman, started one Gold's Gym, built 4 of my own, leased 3 others out. Public record that I sold them debt free for $2.1 million. And I've always appreciated my colleagues and the guys that gave me a break, and the guys around me, because, one of my all-time worst sayings that somebody came up with from somewhere is enhancement talent, because everybody on that card is important, and especially the first match. The first match sets the tone for the whole night. So the main event, you could take Hogan and Macho Man during the height of their career and put them anywhere, and if that was the only match, and you had a whole bunch of unknown people underneath there, you wouldn't have near the crowds that you had. So it's a package, it's a package deal. So, I appreciate every one of the guys, and that's why I am so into the Cauliflower Alley Club. And I appreciate your support. I appreciate Hannibal TV's support of the Cauliflower Alley Club. We have some tremendous ambassadors that really speak hard for us, from Dwayne Johnson to, of course, Jim Ross has been one of our biggest cheerleaders forever, and Mark Henry, and now is, and for the last few years, has been a tremendous supporter of the Cauliflower Alley Club. David Arquette, Dallas Page, these guys are constantly. Recently, Al Snow jumped on board and as a life member and wants to help. And they realize what good we do. We have the most efficient, effective charity probably in the world. Right now, I know we are the number one most efficient charity in the United States of America. We give away 99.5+% of every dollar we take in. The only money that we spend is for the newsletter that our members get. 4 newsletters every year that you can't get on the internet. And, we have a reunion every year. We had to postpone this one that was in April until September 21st through the 23rd, which will happen in Vegas. I'm pretty sure of that now. We're all scheduled, and we have more and more and more enthusiasm building for the Cauliflower Alley Club, because we are just helping so many people. I mean, we don't mention names, Devin. Usually we don't mention names, but we've helped guys like, that have given us permission. Kamala, saved his home. We've done tremendous stuff with James. Is such a wonderful person. Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, Bobby the Brain Heenan, and guys, guys that were opening matches. As long as you had been in the business for 3 years, that's the requirement. Then whether you're a referee or an announcer, or as long as you're a part of the business, we help these people. And there's so many that fall on dire financial times because there's no 401k. We don't have insurance, and most of them are health related reasons. So it's such an honor to be able to give back to all of those men and women that not only helped my career, but helped all the people I know's career. It takes everybody. I mean, I'm thankful for George Hackenschmidt and for Tragos and Dez and all the people that blazed the trail long before us, because without them, we would never have the business that we have.
Yes, it's a great organization. And another guy that I know wanted to be mentioned that you helped him was Rip Oliver, which I believe you paid some of his bills before he passed away.
Yes, we did. As a matter of fact, we paid he was about to lose all of his property. So we paid all of his property taxes off. Everybody wants to leave their kids something when they pass away. At least that's how I feel. And that's how Rip felt. And he was very upset that he was going to lose his property. I believe it was 10 acres, and the home on his property that he was, because he was going to die. He knew he was going to die. And, sadly, and Billy Jack Haynes helped him out a lot. I know Billy Jack gets a bad rap sometimes, but he was really, really right there for Rip the entire way. And my hat's off to Billy Jack for all that he did for Rip. When I was at the funeral, he had such a wonderful family. It was just so great to meet his family, and to know that now he could leave something to them where they grew up. I mean, and they'll have that for as long as they want to have it.
Now, I believe the April Cauliflower Alley Club was sold out. Does that go on for the September one as well? All the tickets are still.
Well, it wasn't sold out. We were far ahead of any of our past reunions, and we have sold out the last few years. So we think we will be sold out again in September, and we only had out of, I don't know, 370 people that had already bought tickets up to that point, up until COVID came up. 60 people asked for refunds, and
Okay.
of course, we refunded their money. And then we had a tragic thing happen. Dean Silverstone passed away, and our treasurer for 27 years. And so we've had to pick up the pieces there. Unfortunately, we have some of the greatest volunteers, and all of our volunteers, they go there on their own dime. Um, they go there and pay their own hotel room. Everybody pays for everything, just like you do, and everybody else that participates. So that's why we are so efficient.
Now, I heard on another topic, Arn Anderson not too long ago talk about a fight that you had with Matt Bourne that he said was one of the most brutal fights he ever saw. You ended up biting Matt's lip off. I was wondering if I could get your version of those events.
Sure. We were in a bar. I don't know. I can't remember the exact city. Something tells me it was Wheeling, West Virginia. Um, and it's Flair's favorite. Ric Flair loves to tell the story. But Matt Bourne came up to me. Dick Murdoch was there. Killer Carl Cox. Ric Flair. Just so many of the guys were there. Matt Bourne was new into the WWE, WWF, and he wanted to, I guess, make a name for himself. So he came up to me and he said, "Why are you messing with my girlfriend?" And I said, "Excuse me, Matt. I didn't really know Matt." I said, "Who's your girlfriend?" I didn't know I was messing with your girlfriend. Who's your girlfriend? He said, "Oh, it doesn't matter," or something. He mumbled to me, and I said, "Okay, well, just have a good night." And I don't believe that there's no girls here that I'm messing around with. So if your girlfriend's here, I'm certainly not me. So as I turned, he sucker punches me and the back of the head, and he goes to uh, suplex me from behind. And as he did when I was in the air, I spun around on top of him and wound up on the ground, and he's grabbing my ears and my hair at the same time, and he's trying to bite my nose. So I saw his lip since he was trying to, and his teeth. And so since he was trying to bite my nose, I went ahead and bit his lip off and spit it out. And then I beat him up all I had to beat him up. And I thought the fight was over. So, uh, you know, guys take him somewhere and everybody's having a drink, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, somebody jumps on my back. It's Matt again. Jumps back in my back. Boom, boom, boom. We start fighting again. Finally, again, it's subdued. Beat him up some more. His head looked like a swollen pumpkin. And I never started a fight ever. Um, but I've been in 6 pretty brutal fights, and I never lost one. Not that I'm not. Believe me, I'm very humble, and I'm not bragging or anything because there's a lot of people that can kick my butt on my best day, um, and that goes for everybody. So you just never know. That's why it's always better to be humble and just get along with people. And I've always felt like that. I don't feel like I'm better than any fan that buys a ticket or the guy that picks up my trash. We're all equal. We're all human beings, and we treat each other with respect. And that's the kind of life that I've believed in for so long. And then so the third time the bar's getting ready to close. Now this is about an hour. Well, maybe not an hour, about I don't know, a half hour later maybe. And Matt Bourne comes back, and I'll never. Matt Bourne comes back, hits me again from, well, he went to hit me and somebody said something and I turned around and we started rolling again, and boom, all of a sudden I'm trying to drag him to the door and he trips me as I'm trying to drag him to the door, and or I fell, and I think he put his leg out, and which is a good move. Matt was a wrestler before. And so I go down, and as I come up, he's got his finger in my eye. And Uncle Ivan Koloff was sitting there, and he kicked Matt's hand, and he said, "No eyes." Thank you, Uncle Ivan. God bless you. And so that was the end of the story. But that fight went on for probably 15 minutes in total.
Why are the bouncers letting him back in?
What's that?
Why
Why would
would the bouncers let him back in if he kept causing that? That's crazy.
I have no idea, Devin. I have no idea.
Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but someone told me you were allegedly also in a scrap with Buzz Sawyer. Is that
Yes,
true? That
yes.
was one of the six.
That was one of the six. Buzz Sawyer, uh, Matt Bourne, Bobby Jaggers, Moondog Spot, Doug Summers. Um,
I
I'm
remember the Doug Summers story from the first shoot interview you did. That one was very personal, and that's understandable. But we know that Mad Dog, we've heard that he was always on a lot of stuff and highly uncontrollable, I guess. So was he just pushing your buttons the wrong way that night, or?
Yeah, I don't really like to talk about the deceased so much. And Buzz was a good guy. He's from across the bay. Uh, we were friends. I just wish that I had the match that him and I had in Hartford, Connecticut. I believe it was Hartford. Um, we had a 15-minute Broadway or a draw, 15-minute draw. Some people don't understand the old terms, but if they asked you in the old days to do a Broadway, that meant to go through the time limit. And it was the first time we ever worked together. And it was like magic. I mean, the people, they just were so engrossed. And Chief Jay Strongbow came up to me afterwards and said, BBB. He's always got it, BBB. He goes, BBB. That was probably the best match I ever saw in my life. I wish we would have had 30 minutes. And, he just would talk in a different way. You got to understand Chief. I love Chief. A lot of people, Chief was kind of the office stooge, but that was his job. And he was so electrified over that match. He would just all the time talk to me about that. And I've yet to find anybody that can find that match.
Well, maybe someone will see this and search it up for us. One question a lot of people wanted me to ask you was, I guess somebody wrote in a book recently that the thing between you and Iron Sheik was a big work. I don't know if you can answer that or not, but
Well,
that's, I guess, recently came out.
uh, no, yes and no. Um, it started in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I thought it was really over. Sheik and I used to shoot a little bit at the beginning of the match, and once in a while he'd hook me, and once in a while I'd hook him. And we were in Hershey, and he said something to Nikolai, his partner, Nikolai Volkov, great guy. And hear him talking in the corner before the matches start. So him and I start, and we do a little thing, and um, he has me in a front face lock, and all of a sudden he's shooting on the front face lock on me. Damn Sheik, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to give him. I didn't want to tap him, and I saw the wrist, so I wound up double wrist locking him, and Nikolai was like a Cheeky, what you gonna do? Cheeky, Cheeky. And he's going, oh, so he finally tapped, and now Nikolai rode his butt. I mean, I can't imagine what he said to him in the car. They were always riding together, and Jimmy and I were off in another car, so I have no idea. But apparently that got to him so much that he didn't forgive me for that. Then when we were at that roast. Um, yeah, that was funny. I'll never forget um, uh, Razor Ramon coming through the back of the curtain. I don't know if that's on the tape of that or not, but
I think I've seen that. He was a little inebriated or something that night.
yes, 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 yeah. But somebody said Sheik wasn't being real cordial to me that night, and I don't know what the deal was. It was like since that last night in Hershey, he was kind of different, and so they said, well, Sheik might get upset with you, or he might push you or something, and just let it ride because it's a Sheik roast. We don't want anything to. Well, he didn't push me. He slapped me, and he slapped the pee out of me really hard. And so it was kind of set up, but not set up to be slapped like that. And it took everything that I had to keep from jumping on him. But again, there was a packed house and a lot of people, and I just wanted to be a gentleman, and so I was a gentleman, and that's the story.
And by that time, I mean, his health was already on the downward, and you're obviously still in shape. Even with before your back surgery, you were wrestling what, a 25-year-old or so, a couple days before.
Yeah, I can wrestle right now. I mean, I don't have any fat on me at all. I mean, but yeah, I stay in shape. Uh, I enjoy staying in shape. I mean, age is a number. There's no way I could go out and carry a schedule like the guys do now, but I could certainly go out and wrestle in my fifth decade.
And a fan wanted me to ask you, I mean, I've seen you guys at conventions. You just basically ignore each other. He's really suffering now anyways, but like you guys don't have any confrontations now, right? It's pretty much over.
No, no, it's over. I've got to give him a lot of credit. He told me one day, he said, BBB, I'm really sorry uh, for whatever, I forget exactly how he put it. And, I had a real deep sorrow in my heart for Khosrow because his daughter had died from an overdose. And, him and his wife, Carol, were getting a divorce. They're back together, I know now. And she's got to be a very, very strong woman to stay with Khosrow through all the stuff. And, I know I don't like to have heat with anybody. It's just not my nature. And I'm glad that the hatchet was buried. But I never knew all those clips were on. There's so many clips on the internet. And, funny cartoons and all this. And I didn't know that till like 5 years ago. Somebody said, "Oh, you got to see all these clips. They're hilarious." And I said, "What clips?" They got you and Sheik. And I can't believe the effort that some people went through. I don't know who even did it to do all these cartoons. And you probably see them because you watch everything, Devin. But anyway, I thought,
I try not to watch some of them. Some of those are pretty explicit.
yeah, too explicit. It's not something I want my two boys to watch.
Now, a fan had a question for me to ask. He said he noticed that you were in a lot of double DQs when you were in WWE. Not a lot of clean finishes. That might just be his perspective. Did you notice that there was a lot of not clean finishes, or was that just his perspective?
No, I'm sure. Well, I know we had several like that, but I really don't like double DQs. I'd rather do a job if it's done right. But just again, if it's done right, um, it's we do what the booker says. I've always been of that mindset. I don't. Not that I haven't resisted doing a job. I have, and once you get to a certain point in the business, everybody does. It's just where you're going.
Greg Valentine actually told me that he actually left WWE, I think, or almost left due to having to job to the Killer Bees at one point. Did you ever hold anything against him for that?
No, I stretched him every time we got in the ring. Ask him. He used to go, "Oh, please, 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 oh, don't do it." And I'd always if you ever watch the matches, it's maybe 7 out of 10 of them, it's a shoot takedown. Um, it's I Greg. We all have a role to play. Sometimes you're up here, and I've been on the top of the card, and I've been on the bottom of the card, and I've been everywhere on the card, and I don't care, just as long as I'm on the card, and as long as I'm making enough money to feed my family, to pay my bills, whatever. That's the kind of mindset that I always had. Unfortunately, when I was younger, I listened to a tape called "The Richest Man in Babylon," and between listening to that tape, which the premise is to save 10% of all your money and put it in a different account, and it's your first bill before you even pay your light bill or your mortgage or whatever. You pay your ABC bill or your 10%. And it sunk in, and I did that. And you always hear as a wrestler, it's not how much you make, kid, it's how much you save. Riding with great, wonderful coaches like the Briscoe brothers. I miss Jack so much. He was one of my greatest friends. Oh gosh, behind me is a picture of Jack and I back there. But I've got when Rocky Johnson just passed away, that tore me up. I loved Rocky so much. I can't even explain how much I loved Rocky Johnson. And through all the years, I was in high school when I met Rocky. And I remember I was at the matches, and I just was so impressed with this guy that had these giant pecs and the body he had and the moves that he could do and everything. And Buddy Colt was apparently Rocky and Buddy worked all over the United States of America and drew a lot of money. And for a lot of people don't know this, Rocky Johnson was in a program in every territory that they ever worked in, except for maybe the first, couple, like everybody else in Canada, where he broke in. And, I love Canada. Matter of fact, Toronto was always my favorite town to work in, but more so than Madison Square Garden. And Mr. T was our manager there, but just thinking out loud. But my mind just wandered. Go back to the question, please, Devin.
You kind of veered off onto Rocky Johnson.
Oh, yeah. So we're at the Armory in Tampa, and all of a sudden this guy comes up to me and hands me a popcorn and a soda. And he said, "Here, this is from Mr. Johnson." And apparently Buddy Colt told Rocky how much I was a fan of his. And Rocky, I looked up and Rocky was getting popcorn. He had popcorn and a soda in his hand. And Buddy told him that I was a very, poor kid, which I was. I got busted with food stamps in the 5th grade. It was an unbelievable story. That'll be in my book coming out. And there's a lot of things I don't say because I have to save things for the book that I've been writing for a couple of years now, but we'll be done by the end of the year. And Scott Stevens, who's he's got top novels all over the world. He is helping me with the book. He's a tremendous guy. Formatting it, things like that. Every word in it is words from my mouth or someone else's mouth. But it's all true, 100% shoot stuff. So, excuse me, Tony Marino.
You can take that if you want.
Nah, I'm gonna call him back when we're done. You know Tony Marino?
Only the name.
Tony was a unique character. He wrestled with Bruno a lot back in the day, before the day, and he's 88 years old now. And again, I try to help a lot of the guys, and I just encouraged a lot of people to write to him at the Health and Rehab Center at 518 West Fletcher Avenue in Tampa, Florida. And if you write to Dino Lanza at Tampa Health and Rehab, 518 West Fletcher Avenue, it makes him feel good. He's like a star, getting the fan mail, and the nurses treat him extra good. And I just came up with that idea, and I mentioned it, I guess, on Twitter and Facebook, and all of a sudden he's getting all this fan mail, and he is just so happy. and especially during this COVID-19 time, when you can't really go into those kind of facilities. They don't want you in there, and so I appreciate everybody that's mailed Dino Lanza, uh, aka Batman. He went as Batman, Tony Marino, for a long time.
Do you have any stories about the Ultimate Warrior? I know your paths must have crossed for a few years there in WWE.
Yeah, it did, and you know, um, the Warrior was kind of more reclusive than most people. He did have a few friends that were close to him. I was never a real close friend, but we were always cordial to each other. We always shared locker room stories. He was always around some of the great bulldog ribs, and we'd laugh together. And he worked out hard in the gym. And but as far as any real stories that would be of interest to your audience, I would say that I don't have anything other than to say what a very, very nice person that he was to me. I never saw him be upset with the other guys around him, so I have nothing but praises for him.
And speaking of the Bulldogs, Jacques Rougeau wanted me to tell you hello.
Yeah, please tell
Uh,
me hello.
I will. Any memories of working with the Rougeau brothers?
Oh yeah, I loved working with Jacques and Ramon, and I'll never forget. Um, I was very upset with Jacques uh, when he hit Dynamite, but with the roll of quarters. I was right there. Brunzell and I were right there around the corner. Um, Tommy went to get some coffee, but I understand Jock. Maybe not the roll of quarters and a sucker punch, but I understand him wanting to kick Tommy's ass because the ribs were getting out of control. I mean, it was brutal. The ribs that they did, they were just beyond. When you start messing with people's clothes and their bags and things that are going to cost money, to me, that's not a good rib. And I love Davy Boy. I mean, the Hart family is like an extended family of mine, just like the Von Erichs. And um, it's just sad to see that happen. And at the time, I was really upset to see Tommy with his teeth knocked out, bleeding like that, knowing that he got sucker punched. Um, I didn't like that, but you have to really think and put everything into perspective. And it took me a few days to really put everything into perspective and to realize that that was just Jock's way. And I'm sure Ramon was, their brothers. I'm sure they were coaching each other on, and I don't think the Bulldogs knew that they had gone that far. And it is what it is, and it happened. And you know, I, I I still love Jock and Ramon. I think they're two talented athletes. Ramon is extremely smart business guy. Jock is he didn't fall off a turnip truck either. So they're both good guys, and in the business you have a lot of pressure on you. I mean, I remember, speaking of Greg Valentine, I remember one time he was ready to quit, and so were Jimmy and I, because we had worked 67 days straight, many double shots during that time, several different countries, and with no days off. And that's just so hard on somebody's body, Devin. And that's why I've had 15 operations from the business, is because I've always been under the premise that whether there's 100 people or 50,000 or 100,000, whatever, 10,000, you work the same way. Each person that's there paid their hard-earned money, so you have to go out there and perform to the best of your ability. And that's just the way it was, and just so many great memories.
Now, before the Herb Abrams episode aired, you appeared on after whatever it's called, Dark Side of the Ring, the special on David Schultz. You had some stuff to say about that. I didn't. I wasn't able to find that episode, but I was wondering if you could just share some of your thoughts on David Schultz and the slapping incident.
Yeah, I was right there when it happened. Getting ready to go back to Florida to win the Florida heavyweight title, and I'd made because I wrestled for Vince Senior, and I had wrestled on two different uh, like year-long stints with WWF because or WWF before they dropped the F, and the Florida tape from Channel 44 WTOG with Gordon Soley went to New York and to the northeastern area of the country. So people got to kind of see my career grow up, and I had a great time there. Vince McMahon Sr. was perhaps the most honest, easiest guy to talk to as far as a promoter that I've ever been around. And I'll never forget one day we were in Hamburg, and there was a stair where we did TV, and then there was one bathroom. And Vince McMahon was so humble that there'd be a line. He'd stand at the back of the line. And so Hulkster was behind Vince, and I was behind Hulkster, and everybody's talking, kind of getting their way to the restroom. And Vince goes into the bathroom, and Senior goes in the bathroom. He doesn't shut the door. Him and Terry are still talking. Most of the guys just went to the bathroom. So Vince leaves, and Terry says, he says, Brian, look at this. And I looked, and the toilet bowl was full of blood. So we didn't know what was going on, but Vince had just urinated pure blood, and he was so, I guess, engrossed in talking to Terry that he didn't flush the toilet, and it was there. And it was a very sad day because I knew something was very wrong with him. Then I found out about the cancer, and I just still remember Vince Jr. sitting with his dad in a wheelchair, and Vince Jr. was a wonderful son to his dad that I saw. Um, I've never seen tears in Vince Jr.'s eyes until one day he was talking to his dad, and just stood up, and he had tears in his eyes, and I knew that that what was going to happen, and it was just a very, very, very tough time. But Vince was a class act.
So, as you were saying, you were on your way out. Obviously, Senior and Eddie Graham had a relationship, and I guess you witnessed that and the commotion in the dressing room afterwards.
Yeah, because when I went to go to Florida, Vince Senior actually, it's a long story. I may have told you, but my nickname that my mom gave me is Bieber, and like Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
And so she'd call me Bieber when I was young, and my brothers and sisters, they couldn't say Brian when they grown up, so they always called me B. I guess my dad just told them to call me B, and because we're like all five of us, well, four of us are a year apart, and then I have a younger brother, Mike, that's from another mother, and my parents were divorced when I was 13. Um, but I've always been very close to them. My mom lives in my guest house. I just saw her on the dock right now, just a little bit ago, throwing bread to the fish. So that's it's a real blessing having your mom and dad alive at the age of 86, and my mom's 80. So it's a blessing that I can take care of my mom. She can never live on a $600 a month Social Security check. So that became kind of taboo as I was getting older. I didn't want anybody to know about Bieber, especially. B was okay. And so Buddy Colt, the story, uh, my mom called during my first match, my mother called the armory up, and Charlie Lay said, "Buddy, you got a phone call." Buddy went and took the phone call. All the boys are there. The Briscoe, everybody's there. Don Morocco, Jimmy Garvin, a whole bunch of guys. They had pulled so many ribs on me. But Buddy comes back and he says, "Hey, I just got a call from your mother, and I was working against Pat Patterson. It was Skip Young and I against Pat Patterson and Ivan Koloff. And Buddy says, please don't hurt her Bieber." So right away, Dusty's leaned back in that chair at the office and he goes, "Beeper." So he put a P in it instead of a B. So he always called me Beeper. And so then Orndorff started calling me Beeper, and I tried to put the lid on that. But anyway, Vince Sr. Knew about the story, and he said, "Why don't you be B. Brian Blair?" He said, "There's a lot of Brian Blairs in this world." He said, "I don't know of any B. Brian Blair, and you are B. Brian Blair. Why don't you be B. Brian Blair?" I said, "That's fine with me, sir. I like it." And so then I was B. Brian Blair because of Vince Sr. So.
Wow. And now only pretty much you're the only Brian Blair too. So you've outlived all the other ones that, or you've become more famous than any other ones that may have existed, I guess.
Well, no, there's just in Hillsborough County where I live, there's probably 75 Brian Blairs.
Oh, but I mean for wrestlers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now you just mentioned Paul Orndorff. I just had a fan question. I'll slip in here quick. A fan wanted to know if Paul and Hogan got along behind the scenes.
Yes and no. They were always cordial to each other, but there was a little animosity, and those guys had some matches that were just off the chain. I remember one of the cage matches in the Cap Center, and I got his picture on the wall. Joe, the coach, Joe from the Washington Redskins, brought his kids there, and he was such a fan after that match, the cage match, because sometimes in it was weird, in WWF, WWE, they would put the main event on, in the middle of the card, and these guys had a cage match that was absolutely incredible, and I remember ribbing Paul that night because his arm was starting to shrink up, and he came up to me and he says, "Beeper," he says, I need to do something to outshine Hogan tonight. You got any suggestions?" I said, "Let me think for a minute." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay, tell me." Paul would get so excited over everything. Okay, what is it?" I said, "Well, you know how he does the bow and arrow and the pose and all that?" I said, "Your legs are better than Hogan's, and your abs are better too. So why don't you emulate him and do that stuff?" I said, "Then show him your abs and flick the abs off." I said, "Then show him the quads, and make his do his thing like Hogan ain't got that. Hogan ain't got that." and so I said, "Then what I want you to do is break right down into the fiddler crab." And I don't know if you know what a fiddler crab is, but they only have one arm.
Right.
So so Paul didn't get it at first. He goes, "This is great. Oh, this is fabulous." So about 2 minutes later, he comes back to me. He goes, "Oh, man, you're ribbing me because of my arm. Oh, you son of a gun." And he went on and on because he loved it. He loved it so much. But it just, Paul, some things took a minute to sink in for Paul. And I thought he'd get mad at me right away. I have so many rib stories with Paul chasing me, but from ribs that we've done to each other. And in Florida, we catch fiddler for crabs for bait. And they have one small arm and one big arm. And Paul hurt his arm with Hogan. How Terry would run in. He would give you the turnbuckle, shoot you into the turnbuckle, and run in with the clothesline.
Yeah.
And somehow, I'm sure it was an accident. Terry never tried to hurt anybody on purpose, obviously. And he hit Paul with a clothesline in the neck. And I remember on the road after that match, Paul was complaining, "Oh, my neck, my neck, my neck." And I would say, "Paul, go to the doctor, go to the doctor." And he'd put it off, put it off, put it off. And finally, you could see his arm shrinking. And I said, "Paul, you need to go get an operation." And, he's making 25 to 35,000 bucks a week. I mean, I saw his checks, and he just thought he was going to lose his spot. And I kept trying to tell him, "Paul, you're too talented. There's no Oscar." I called him Oscar. "There's no Oscar like you. And you're going to have your spot back. Guaranteed. I guarantee you'll have your spot back." But he just couldn't take the time off in his mind to go get that operation.
I
So
see.
Paul kind of got that bothered Paul with Terry, to answer your question.
Now, the UWF, I think it did the second highest rating of any Dark Side of the Ring this week, so it was a big hit. I have some questions for you related to that, but maybe since you're the expert on it, maybe you could just take us through from start to finish your story of it, of what you feel like sharing, and then if you don't answer some of the questions I have for you in it, I'll ask you at the end.
Okay, your audience is going to get a real treat because I didn't have time to do this on Dark Side of the Ring, because there's three people. You have three, four people, four characters, and back and forth due to time constraints. But I met Herb Abrams um, somewhere I was on the West Coast. I met Herb, and it was around 1990, and he told me he was doing the UWF, and he wanted me to be a big part of that. So we talked about money, and the money was right. And Herb had owned some clothing companies. He had a big and tall store. He had a woman's store for heavier women, with very nice clothing. And he was successful in that business. And he even had a partner, I can't remember his name at one time, that helped him with the UWF start the formation of it. And I went to Reseda, California, worked, had some, even though the places only held 400 people, they were packed, and so the audience was hot. It was live. I decided to create a character, a valet for myself, which happened to be my wife Tony, and um, she became my valet and dressed in. We called her Honey. And I used to bale hay with my grandfather. Some wonderful stories of my grandfather in Arkansas, and he had usually 300 to 400 head of cattle, and we'd round them up on horses, and we had these cattle prongs, and they'd have 6 double D batteries in them, and they'd shock the pee out of those cattle, and they'd go wherever you want them to go because you had to get them into a chute to give them shots, worm them, and spray them for flies. And so I had always remembered that cattle prong, and I thought, well, what a great gimmick. So I told you I like visual aids. So this was the original Stinger cattle prong. You can see I don't have any batteries in it right now, or you could see the arc uh, light up. The batteries go in here, and it's got a safety on it, just like a gun, because it'll light you up. So um, I we had a finish. I did it with Spivey and Orton, or something had happened. They do something dirty and dastardly to me, and Honey would reach in and sting him. Maybe I'd make a comeback. Boom! All of a sudden, they stop me and uh, do something really nasty, about to pin me or something. And Honey would reach in and press the button and sting him, and they'd go crazy. And of course, there's no batteries in it. So one time I thought she was going to catch me, but I snuck the batteries in there, and I put the batteries in there. And so I'm working with Bob Orton, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And I've never been shocked by one of those. And didn't even want to test it, you know. So, I mean, if it moves a bull, it's got to hurt pretty bad. So she reaches up and presses that button because I always told her, it's a shoot. You know, you're working a shoot. You're always working a shoot. You know, that's what I was always taught. You know, you're working a shoot. I mean, it's got a. If the fans don't believe it, then you know you don't have the luxury of angles and television cameras. I mean, you got to lay it in, and so I give her the. So she pressed the button. You know, I said, hold it like you're, you know, shaking it and everything, like it's moving your arm. So I put those batteries in there, and all of a sudden, the finish comes. I hear her go, oh my gosh, the loudest scream I ever heard. And he goes, GD. And he's going, ah, you know, and that Bob Orton thing, and the way he puts his arms up, ah. And so it was a shoot, you know, and he's going, God damn, you know, excuse my French, so I hate that word. But he was really upset just for a minute. And anyway, finish goes, and she was so upset. Oh my gosh, because he was looking at her like she did it, you know, on purpose. Um, so uh, anyway, not long after that, she decided she had enough of the wrestling business.
So how did you end up becoming booker of that company? Was that from the start when he recruited you? He wanted your mind to help him develop angles?
Yeah, he needed that and some talent and some things like that. And, you know, I just didn't want, I mean, I booked in Oklahoma and, you know, did a lot of creative things, but he, um, he wanted somebody that had talent connections too, and somebody that the guys kind of respected. And so I got a lot of the talent there for him. And he was running out of money and started um, bouncing some checks. But prior to that, he came to Tampa a lot. He loved to come to Tampa because there was lots of hookers and lots of cocaine in Tampa. And that was Herbie's favorite thing. You put on a pair of cowboy boots and give him some cocaine and a hooker, and that's his end all do all. And so we would go to eat at a place called Donatello's. I had a friend named Ed Barbara who was a really good golfer, and he was also a wrestling fan and enjoyed the industry quite a bit. And so he would come to dinners, and Ed had a friend named Tom Kenny. Well, Tom Kenny owned a switching company called CMI. And what they did is they bought minutes. He lived in Atlanta, and they bought minutes from MCI. Remember the phone company MCI?
Yeah.
He would package minutes and sell them at a discounted. He'd buy them at a discounted rate and sell them at a cheaper rate than AT&T and the other companies. So he was making a ton of money, and his brother was the accountant who was the super fan. I mean, the biggest wrestling fan I've ever seen in my life, and he was the accountant. And so we would have these big dinners in Donatello's. It became like a little hangout for everybody. You know, they'd fly in, and um, it was Learjets and limousines. And Herbie decided somehow, I guess, well, Tom Kenny has a golf tournament. The reason I got to know Tom better is Ed said that there was a golf tournament at Horseshoe Bend Country Club in Atlanta, and that everybody was going to fly in and play golf for a charity. So I'm not the best golfer in the world, but I can golf. You know, I have wonderful times with great story with Undertaker and Brian Adams, Dan Spivey. We were all golfing buddies, but uh, we used to always play bingo, bango, bongo. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but all the golfers know what bingo, bango, bongo is. And so we go to this Horseshoe Bend tournament, and we win the tournament. I cannot. Yeah. Ed's on fire. As a matter of fact, for another visual aid, just so you can verify the story here, here's our trophy. And it says, if you can read it, it says 1991 Horseshoe Bend country club, and so we win the tournament. And um, Ed's real excited about that, and Ed's got a ton of money too. And everybody winds up eating at Donatello's again. And this time, Tom brings his brother from the switching company, and Tom has a wonderful wife, Marcia, and she's still alive. Tom passed, God bless him, but uh, we're all having a good time at Donatello's restaurant in Tampa, one of the best Italian restaurants you'll ever eat at. And inside of the restaurant, we're all at the tables, and I can see Herbie now going to work. And we wind up, everybody somehow winds up in Atlanta, and he convinced Tom Kenny to, I don't know what the structure of the deal was, but I know that he wound up getting, he got $3 million in total, $1 million at a time. And Tom didn't know about the last two, only his brother did. Tom was willing to throw $1 million at it, not really caring whether, well, I'm sure he cared, but it wasn't like he wasn't going to be able to pay his mortgage payment if he lost $1 million. So Herb actually got to be really tight with the accountant brother. And so that's where the money started coming from to build the UWF, to get Andre, to get all the talent that he got, that he wound up getting. He was John Tolos. What a funny guy John Tolos was. Again, he was older, and I'm like a young guy in front with some of the older guys that are there, but there's a lot. He brought in a lot of the WWE, Bam Bam Bigelow. He brought in Scott, Bigelow, and he brought in a lot of the guys.
How much would Andre have been in those days? Just to stop you for a second, just ballpark for an appearance.
I would say he probably paid Andre $10,000 or $15,000 for the time, because Vince had let him go, I guess, and he came into that, and so that's how UWF was funded. And then of course we had the pay-per-views. Let me see, we had the what is this, the Bash at the Beach, or Beach Brawl? Beach Brawl. Yeah, we had Bash at the Beach. And it got to be hot enough where the actual magazine started running articles about the UWF, and so it started getting popular. Then Herb always wanted to be the Vince McMahon Jr. He wanted to be the Vince McMahon Jr., and he started the merchandising, and he saw the commercials that we did for Vince, and so then he started his own, T-shirts and merchandising and things like that. Here's one of my all-time favorite early pictures. That's Gordon Soley, Jack Briscoe, and I don't want anybody taking a picture of that, copying it, but it's Gordon Soley, Jack Briscoe, and myself on my couch after I bought the very house that I live in when I was 23 years old. And I think there's a couple beer bottles there, so keep that out of there. So, we used to have a great time. The guys would come over and just have a super time, super time. But he got Orndorff, he got Mick Foley, he got golly, so much talent.
Billy Jack Haynes, I guess.
Yeah, Bob Orton Jr., Billy Jack Haynes. He got Bruno Sammartino. Then he got.
What do you think Bruno would have charged to be under contract, or would it have been just appearances, or would it have been in like a yearly deal?
I don't really know. That was very private. Whatever he paid Bruno, I think only Bruno. Bruno was a very strict business guy. What a great, wonderful man Bruno Sammartino was. When you got to know Bruno, if he liked you, he would do anything for you, and he was just always a gentleman. And one of my favorite things that anybody ever did for me was to sit down and tell me what I did wrong. Nothing people that fear criticism will be fearful all their life, because if you don't accept good criticism, you can never improve. And guys like the Briscoes and Bruno, and they would always put you over for some reason, but then they would come back and say, man, why don't you try it this way? Or why don't you maybe incorporate this? Or, you should have more fire in your comeback, or whatever their advice was. It was always good advice. And you always want to listen to advice, whether you're going to use it or not. People, if they want to explain something, they feel like they're helping you, go ahead and listen. And if it helps you, it helps you. If it doesn't, be polite and let it go. So I was very fortunate to have a lot of good guys around that knew that I liked to hear. And I would even go up and ask some of the older guys, some of my seniors, would you mind, sir, watching my match? And just tell me whatever you think, and I would really, really appreciate that. And so I'd go to an old timer, Bill Watts's territory, like Swede Hansen, um, old timer named Swede Hansen. And even though he didn't wrestle my style and he was different, the older guys, when they're kind of on their way out and they're hanging in, they really appreciate that when a young kid, which I was at the time, asks them, for some help. And I would do that very often. And Bruno was just that kind of guy, like a father figure. I have funny stories with his son David, some I can't repeat.
How would Bruno have gotten along with her? Because it seems like if he had any suspicions about those type of extracurricular activities, he wouldn't have been impressed.
No, not at all. If Bruno had known Herb's lifestyle, which he didn't, Herb was always on his best behavior around Bruno, because Bruno didn't play around with drugs or hookers, or he didn't want anything to do with that. And you know, I I'm glad I stayed clear of all that. Unfortunately, I didn't need to get a hooker. um,
Now, who decided where the events would take place? Because I guess there was one in Dakota, some in California, some in Florida, some in the Carolinas, New York. Seems pretty random.
yeah, there was a lot of guys helping him. Lenny Duge, John Arezzi. A lot of guys were giving Herb advice, and so um, I don't know whether it was Lenny getting the towns. Lenny Duge, Druge, I always pronounce Lenny's last name wrong. Duge, I believe. He was a producer for NBC. I mean, Lenny was a very bright guy, and I think that Lenny helped Herb get the towns.
Okay. Why do you think, like, for instance, the beach bash or beach brawl didn't draw as well as it could have? Was that just local promotion? Because it seems like with that kind of talent, and Florida, for instance, was known as a big wrestling territory, you'd think the crowd would have been bigger.
Well, I would say that, especially in the wrestling, well, in life, wisdom. Wisdom is perhaps the best virtue that you can have, um, but wisdom isn't found among fools. And Herb was foolish in the wrestling business. Again, I don't like to talk about bad about the deceased, but I would say it to his face, and I did many times, um, because of his ego, and wanted to get juice on television as a promoter. I didn't want anything to do with that, and but Herb had to do it. And as long as my checks were clearing, I didn't care. I saw that he was foolish with the wrestling industry, and again, uh, Herb. I said this on Dark Side of the Ring. Herb started at the top really and worked himself down, rather than a Vince McMahon Jr. that started somewhere in here, or senior, and actually Vince Jr. catapulted from WrestleMania 1. Look what he did. So he built the really from the not from the ground up, but from a place down here into a $1 billion industry.
Is there any angles that you produced in the days when you were booking for Herb that you're proud of?
I never really thought about that, Devin, and there's none that really stick out. But there was a couple times where we really uh, hit on all cylinders, um, and things were good. I mean, we had some really, really good house shows, some excellent ones. I mean, Mick Foley, he didn't care if he's the same way. Mick Foley didn't care if there was 20 people or 20,000 people. I don't think we had 20,000 people in the UWF, but he would go work his fanny off all the time. I'd always go, Mick, man, you're way up in the stands, you know, up in the stands, and it shows the audience, that there's no audience there, and so that would bother me. But Mick marches to his own drummer, and he didn't care, and he got over by doing that. So what do I know? But from a television perspective, when you're looking at the shoot, you really don't want to see empty seats. So even though we had a great like ringside crowd, once you go past that, you're seeing an empty building, and you can look at it either way. You can look at it Mick's way, or you can look at it my way, or the way my psychology.
The company way, really, because that reflects poorly on the company. Even if WWE did that, we all know the crowds these days. If someone went on to the hard camera side, they would get in a lot of shit, if not be fired.
Exactly.
But so for that MGM Grand, do you think that the building probably helped bring that event to the building just to get an event of that magnitude in the building?
Again, Herb would either be rich or poor. The deals he worked out, I was never part of that. I was never a part of putting together the major events, and I told him, I said, don't go to Palmetto, Florida for the pay-per-view. I said, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's a gigantic building, but you just, by then the cocaine had got to his brain so much, and it's not just the cocaine. He was drinking scotch. He'd have scotch. He started drinking scotch and cocaine, and then it got to be where he would take the Xanax or the Valiums or whatever to come down off the cocaine, and Herb's mood and his everything started changing. If he would have really listened to bright minds around him, I mean, we just went through the talent he had there. He could have picked every one of the guys' minds and gotten together and done group booking and really made a success out of the UWF, I think. But again, he was foolish in that sense.
What was the first red flag for you? Because obviously, when you first got into this venture with him, you didn't realize what you were dealing with from his kind of mentally unstable personality.
My first red flag was we were in California, and we were supposed to be at we were supposed to ride together to this show, and he wasn't there. We're going to be late to the show. So I go and knock on his hotel room, and he's got freaking hookers and cocaine. And that's the first time I saw him with hookers and cocaine. And I said, this is not right. And if he does this, I already know there's no businessman that's going to survive doing things like this right here. And then a couple checks started bouncing. He bounced one to me, and I went off on him for that because I've never bounced a check to anybody. I remember having Gold's Gyms, having to parlay credit cards to pay my people, before they became so successful. But Herb, I believe in the analogy or the thought process is, you got to crawl before you walk, you got to cry before you talk. And Herb just wanted to cut a promo before he learned to do either while he was running, if you know what I'm saying.
Is it true that he could have paid some of the wrestlers when he was out of money with cocaine? Did you ever hear any of those rumors?
No, there's a few I could think of that he probably could have done that with, but I never heard that he actually did that.
Was there any wrestler when you were booking that territory that ever gave you any problems from a booking standpoint?
No. We forgot to mention Dr. Death Steve Williams. He was a, you know, Brunzell and I became the UWF World Tag Team Champions. Dr. Death Steve Williams was the Universal Wrestling Heavyweight Champion, and Steve got a lot of life back in him with the UWF because after that stupid stuff with the boxing, Steve just wasn't the same after that for a long time. But I really saw the life popping back into him and the enthusiasm. It's just a shame that he got cancer.
And for Herb's death, we heard a couple different versions on the show. What do you think is the most plausible version of how he actually passed away?
I know how he passed away. Passed away in the back of a squad car uh, with his shirt unbuttoned, his long black socks on, a pair of boxing shorts, covered in Vaseline, cocaine, and had a heart attack.
And he was buried after that. The body was put in the ground.
It's the strangest thing, Devin, because I didn't hear about the funeral. I didn't hear about anything other than the police report.
Bill Anderson, I guess, visited his grave or something, that he told me the other day. So there is, I guess, a gravestone for him at least.
Yeah, I saw that on Dark Side of the Ring, where somebody said, and it was very touching. Lenny was extremely touching, saying that I know if Herb was alive that he would call me, because Herb and Lenny were tighter than peanut butter and jelly. I kept Herb at an arm's length because of his lifestyle.
And of course, like, he probably had issues with owing a lot of people money too. So he probably really didn't care if he lived or died too much towards the end.
I don't think he really wanted to die, Devin, but Herb thought he was invincible. I tell you what, Herb was the most affable guy that you could imagine. You just picture a guy about 5'2" in a pair of cowboy boots. He's a stereotypical. My mother's Jewish, so I can say this is a Jew, with the hair all out and sticking straight out. And anyway, he. Sorry about that. So he. I just meant to turn that off.
I'm surprised it's not the Killer Bees theme on there.
So I'm sure that Herb is buried right where his cemetery is.
Did you ever have any contact with WCW about coming in there after UWF shut down?
Absolutely. I was in the back. I was in the back seat. Terry was driving his car. Eric Bischoff was in the front seat. Linda was in the car. Terry's wife. My wife, Tony. I was in the middle. No, Tony was in the middle. I was on the left side, and we had discussed a little bit, and it went into the car. And Eric said, "Okay, I'm gonna fly you up, and we'll get a contract done." And I was excited about it. The money was right, and that was it. I mean, I called for him, and he never returned my call. So,
because you've been tight with Terry from the beginning, didn't you have Hogan's first match with him?
yes, in Chiefland, Florida. He was a super destroyer. That was another rib. That's another story for that. You're gonna milk me for everything. But
Well, maybe you could tell this story or confirm. I did read it in Hogan's book. Were people saying that Pat Patterson was going to like convincing him that part of his initiation was Patterson was gonna have his way with Hogan, I guess, sexually in the back, and he was all freaked out that that was gonna happen.
um, if that's true, I don't. Terry never shared that with me. I mean, um, it was his daughter Brooke's birthday, May 5th, and we chatted a little bit. I've always been fond of Terry, and we've had a long time. Him and Mr. Wonderful and my little brother were my best men in my wedding, and that's just not more ribs. That makes me think of more funny stuff. Uh, but we've always confided in each other, and he's very easy to talk to, and he's a great listener. Unlike another guy that I really like, and a strange character, Jesse Ventura. Um, Jesse and I live in adjoining apartments in the Kansas City territory, probably my least favorite territory of all times, because the trips were long and the pay was skinny. And Tank Patton, I remember a guy named Tank Patton. I remember Buck Robley was the booker. It's the first time I ever participated. It was a Halloween night in Ottumwa, Iowa, I believe it was, and they had a blindfold battle royal. Never heard of a blindfold battle royal. So, the spots though were hilarious. You could actually see through the blindfold. So you'd shoot somebody into the rope for a backdrop, and you'd bend over, and they'd run past you and fall over the top rope, and just a lot of comical spots. But Jesse was the kind of guy you got in the car with him, and he would rock back and forth. He always had the dip in his mouth. He'd never stop rocking. Never. I mean, he'd be in his
I've heard
apartment.
that from other people too.
He'd be in his apartment with no shirt on and a pair of boxers and his little dog Arnold. I can picture it right now, and he'd be rocking, even if the chair didn't rock, he would be rocking, and he'd have that dip in his mouth. And but he could talk a mile a minute, so you have to be a good listener to hang around Jesse, which I did quite often. And so Jesse would speak 90% of the time, and I would answer the other 10%. Just listening to Jesse, but he's a very interesting person.
And apparently he's talking about it again. He might be running for president under the Green Party. He's going to decide by July. What do you make of that?
I don't think he will. I just don't.
Any unusual story or any story we may not have heard about Jesse you could share with us? He's pretty popular on this channel.
Oh yeah, this is a good story. You should ask Jesse about. We were the young guys. I remember I was going to Kansas City for my first territory after leaving Florida, and that's where I met Jesse. And Jesse was still green. He had been in the business a little longer than I had, but we were both still kind of green. And we worked an angle, and because they had always featured the older guys so often, and Jesse could really talk. I mean, Jesse had a great rap right from the beginning. And Kansas City, big Coliseum, hadn't been sold out in well over a year, and it was Harley Race, Bob Geigel, and Pat O'Connor, and all three of them were there. And they were so excited. I mean, there were people that could not get in the building, and Jesse and I were the main event. And I remember they were laughing, they were talking, and everything was really cool. And there's a big curtain there in the auditorium, and I could see him over in the corner. And I was happy, because this was like my first big time main event, and Jesse and I worked really hard for that to get there. But they would always give us a finish and tell us, what to do. I mean, these guys knew their stuff. Well, it's time for the main event. It's time for us to go on, and nobody's giving us a finish. And I said, Jesse, did you get a finish? No, I didn't either. Jesse said, no, let's rock it with a lip out. And I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I don't know. What do you want to do? And so we're deciding what to do. And somehow we came up with, okay, there's a lot of heat here. They're gonna go crazy. So let's milk them before we even tie up or whatever. And so he said, okay, why don't you chase me around the ring? I'll get in and I'll beg off. And let's play it by ear. So, oh no, there was a drop down spot somewhere. Uh, I think I went to swing at him first after he begged off. He nut shot at me, grabbed me, um, threw me into the ropes, dropped down. I jumped over him. And when I jumped over him, I wound way up. And when I hit him, it sounded like the roof came off the building because I had already chased them around, and they still hadn't seen us. So at least we were in our greenness, we were smart enough to know that much. But every time I hit him, it was electrifying. The whole crowd went boom, boom. I mean, it was loud, and so we both thought it was a great match. And oh gosh, I chased him all the way. He decides to bail, and I decided to chase him, and I caught him, and I beat him some more, boom, boom, and I beat him so much. We get to the back, and there's Pat O'Connor, Harley Race, and Bob Geigel, and they're going, "What the hell were you guys doing?" I, we were like dumbfounded. What do you mean? We just heard all this great noise. And what do you mean? Oh my gosh. You never stopped him, Jesse. You should have stopped him. You should have beat the piss out of him. And then Geigel goes, did you give him the finish? No. Harley, did you give him, this is Pat O'Connor talking, did you give him the finish? No, I thought you were getting him the finish. And so nobody gave us the finish. And so now they start this big argument in between the three of them. And Jesse and I are looking like, oh my gosh, these guys are getting ready to shoot on each other. And so we went back to our locker rooms, and each one of them, I don't know what they said to Jesse, but they came to me and said, I guess we dropped the ball, blah, 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 and it was a shame because, we satisfied the people. We didn't give them something. He should have beat me somehow or slipped down a banana peel, or um, he could have done something to completely stop me and haul ass after I hit him just a few times, and then we could have come back in a lumberjack match.
Yeah.
So it couldn't escape, and maybe the lumberjack could turn on us, and then we could come back in a cage match, and so we could, what I'm saying. I'm thinking Booker now.
Yeah.
So anyway,
The heat was wasted.
yes.
And you just mentioned Harley. I got to ask you about Harley because, of course, we lost him over the past year since the last Cauliflower Alley reunion. I was a huge fan of his and always loved him. Attended a couple of his camps. Great guy.
Um, Harley was a fabulous guy, and I remember vividly when I came into the Kansas City territory. Harley was kind of took me under his wing, and we were in his Porsche, this white Porsche, and we're driving. And he scared me so bad because he would go so fast. And I don't know whether he was ribbing me, or I've heard a lot of stories. That's just how he drove. And I mean, fast on like 2-lane roads. And we were going down this 2-lane highway, and all of a sudden the window rolls down. He reaches underneath the seat and he pulls out this big, dirty, hairy 357 Magnum and starts going blam, and my eardrums are about to break. Blam, blam, blam. And I see a jackrabbit. As I'm turning, he was trying to shoot a rabbit at 100 miles an hour. And he was just crazy like that. And one thing that was absolutely hilarious in Shreveport, Louisiana, there was this uh, there was this dancer, and I was never into strip clubs or anything like that, but there was one little club that the guys would go to in Bossier City once in a while, and there was a couple dancers there, and I guess Harley kind of liked the girl, and he he kept buying her drinks and was buying her drinks. And he found out that she was drinking just ginger ale, that there was no alcohol in there, and he figured he's going to get a little loopy, whatever. And so um, all the guys are talking, things are just happening. Harley's down there and towards the front, and we see this girl bend over. All of a sudden, I looked over and I see this girl bent over, and all of a sudden, I mean, when she bent over, it was like holding her stomach, and I'm trying to put this in the kindest way. She got diarrhea, and it like flew out of there between her G string. They were totally naked, and Harley had put a whole bunch of Visine in that drink, and apparently Visine gives you diarrhea. And I wish Harley was here to tell the story, but he gimmicked her drink for her, not for him gimmicking him. Telling him that he was buying her drinks and she was making him drink more. And here she didn't even have alcohol in her drink, so he got her back good.
That's hilarious. And another guy really popular on this channel, he was in UWF. We talked about him before with Rip, but do you have any personal stories about Billy Jack Haynes? I know he worked the Florida territory. He was in WWE with you.
Yeah, no, I mean Billy was always Billy and I always got along. I know that he was very intimidating to a lot of people, and Billy was always jacked up. On a lot of the guys were jacked up on the roids, but he he was just a very he could get really mad. I remember a lot of arguments he would get into with different people, just yelling back and forth, and just stuff I don't like to be around. And I never really saw him beat anybody up or anybody beat him up, but I saw several times when it looked like somebody was going to hit somebody.
And is it true that there was a title switch once with the Killer Bees at a house show or something that was never acknowledged on TV?
Yes, I believe it was in Rochester, then Binghamton. Um, and was just wasn't a big, it was, we had been promised the belts 3 times. It was just an appeasure type thing. And we had been promised the belts 3 times. And by Vince and George Scott. And that's why I wound up giving my notice in Salisbury, Maryland. I asked Vince if I could speak with him. And of course, he's always a gentleman to me. And I'll never forget that. Vince Jr. was always a gentleman. And always has been a gentleman to me. You hear a lot of bad stories about Vince Jr., but he's always been wonderful. And I said, Vince, I just, I'm beat up. I'm tired. I just want to give my 2 weeks notice. This was right before WrestleMania 5, a little bit before WrestleMania 5, in 1989, I believe it was. And I had really developed a great friend in Pete Grimkowski, who owned 52% of Gold's Gym Corporate. And I said, I want to just go try my hand in business of some kind. And he was very understanding. He said, okay, I want you to come back. I want you to be successful in your business, but I want you to know the door's open. Come back, we'll do something different. Maybe work for the Intercontinental title or something like that. I mean, he was so businesslike and so thoughtful, and even paid me for WrestleMania 5. So that was that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
I see. And I guess you never went back because your businesses were a success.
Oh, exactly. Yes. More successful than I ever dreamed possible.
Is it true Gold's has gone out of business?
I just filed for Chapter 11.
Is that the whole franchise?
That's corporate. So in Gold's Gym, you're a licensee. So when you're a licensee, the difference between a franchise and a licensee, let's say if you go to a McDonald's in Tampa, Tupelo, Mississippi, or anywhere in Tennessee, a Big Mac's a Big Mac. You'll see the golden arches. It's all the same. Pricing's pretty uniform. It's a lot more expensive in Japan or at the airport, but overall, the food's the same. A licensee, they give you minimum standards. And then after the minimum standards, like you have to buy $250,000 worth of equipment. Your licensee fee is $10,000 a year. You have to, anything that says Gold's Gym on it, you have to buy from Gold's Gym. But they don't give you instructions how to run a gym. At least they didn't then. There was no instructions whatsoever. So there was a lot of trial and error, and I remember parlaying credit cards to make payroll. And in the end, we wound up having like 110 employees, 120 employees, not counting our individual contractors, which were our aerobics instructors, because our accountant said if you tell somebody that they have to work for you, then you have to deduct payroll. And so I couldn't afford to do that at the time. And so I just paid one instructor to coordinate all the aerobics instructors. That's why I often wonder how people in the wrestling industry, whether it's AEW, NWA, whoever, get away with, paying somebody as an individual contractor when you can't just go work for whoever you want to.
That's true. And for this coming up Cauliflower Alley Club, just to give a little preview, do you want to talk about some of the honorees this year?
Oh, we have some tremendous honorees from Medusa. It's going to be the Iron Mike honoree. The Road Warriors were coming up on the dark side of the ring. Paul Ellering will be there along with Joe the Animal, and I only wish Hawk could be there, but he'll be there in spirit and on film, on tape. And so the Road Warriors will win the tag team. Rey Mysterio Jr. Is going to win the Lucha Libre Award, excuse me. It's a plethora. All you have to do is go to caulifloweralleyclub.org. You can see everything. And again, you can join for $25 for a year. You have to be a member to come to our reunions, and you have to be a nice person.